Well, it's an honor to be here, and I do remember that conversation when you came and talked to me, and then when Joni came in, it was a no-brainer, because educating our youth about this great country is what this organization is all about, and I know you're all involved, so I don't have to tell you that. I will tell you, I had to go to the back of the room because I was on a conference call with the Republican conference, and there's a bill. We cut a deal on the continuing resolution. So what's really cool about it is my Homeland Security, border security bill is going to be on the continuing resolution. So we're going to shut that border down. If I'm a little speechless, it's because I'm ecstatic, to say the least. We're adding a lot of other riders in there too. I don't want to show the cards too much. Kevin will be upset with me for releasing it, but it's pretty amazing that on Constitution Day, the Congress worked and has reached a deal. You know, I think everybody here knows I'm in the Freedom Caucus, and the Freedom Caucus kind of put our foot down on border security and made it the issue for this funding cycle. It'll be a 30-day continuing resolution, and it's going to be great. So, Charlie's in the back, but I got to tell you, Charlie, that was one of the best. I've heard you sing the national anthem so many times, but I think tonight was one of your best ever. Fantastic job as always, brother. Thank you. You know, every time I hear the national anthem, I think about when it was penned. You think of Francis Scott Key sitting in the belly of a ship as a prisoner of war. And he doesn't know, I mean, they're shelling Fort McHenry, and he wakes up that next morning, and he walks up on top of the ship, and he sees that flag still flying. And he sits down and writes that iconic anthem. It just, those words, I mean, and the second verse, if you've never, oh, thus be it ever when free men shall say, that second verse is even more powerful than the first that we all sing when we sing our anthem. But if you get a chance, Google it and read the second verse. It's just so powerful. Charlie, great job. Really appreciate it. It was 41 years ago and 79 days. 41 years ago, 79 days, that I stood on the plane at West Point as a 17-year-old kid. And I took an oath to defend the Constitution of the United States against all enemies, foreign and domestic. Prepared to give my life for it. And there are men and women in this room who've taken that oath and were willing to write that blank check for the freedom of this great country. But it's interesting, you know, the oath is not to the people of America. The oath isn't to the flag. The oath is not to defend the geography of the country, the land. The oath is to defend the Constitution, the idea of America. And I want to respect this as a not-for-profit organization. And so I don't want to get too partisan tonight because we have to protect their not-for-profit status. But I am going to take liberties and say a few things. In those 41 years and 79 days, I never ever thought that the threats to that Constitution, when I took the oath to defend it against enemies, foreign and domestic, I never thought until just recently that the greatest threats to the Constitution would be more domestic than they are foreign. But they are. We are in a fight for the very meaning of the document. And I'm going to give you a couple of examples really from both sides of the aisle, just to keep it nonpartisan. Just recently, Joe Biden announced his education department that they were going to defund hunter safety programs in schools and archery programs in schools. Now, why would they even have the thought that they could do that? Well, they had the idea that they thought that they could do that because of the end around to the 10th Amendment and the undoing of the 10th Amendment that has happened over the past 60 years, where the federal government taxes the dollars and gobbles them up into Washington and says, oh, by the way, we know the Constitution doesn't say anything about education at the federal level, and oh, by the way, that department should go completely away. But if you want some of this money, you got to comply with Washington, D.C.'s way of running education. Well, as soon as we heard about that, my team, I had them get to writing, and they put together a bill within 24 hours. We got that bill out, and it went viral all over the country. I interviewed with Alaskan newspapers. Even Outdoor Life came and talked to me and said they wanted to do an interview. Had to send them pictures of me hunting when I was a kid. It was great. But we got loud. The American people got loud. And Joe Biden backed down. And they have decided not to do away with those programs and the funding of those programs. And that's 50,000 Tennessee students. And to make sure they don't do it in the future, we filed that bill, and it passed committee last Thursday, and it'll go to the floor of the House here in the coming weeks with unanimous support, Republican and Democrat, out of that committee. Right. The Constitution matters. And on our side of the aisle, just recently there was a vote. And I want to hearken back to when I was a state senator, because there's an analogy to be made. Sometimes conservative principles clash. And when that happens, you go to the Constitution. And when I was a state senator, we had a bill about guns in parking lots. And I know Jack remembers that. I don't think Kerry was in during that cycle, or maybe you were. But the bill basically said that a person could have a gun in their car when they go to work, even if the business where they work wanted to exercise its property rights and say, no, you can't have a gun here. This was a clash between property rights, which are conservative ideas, and gun rights. But the Constitution is clear. You can't infringe on that right. And so I carried the cleanup bill to correct a few things in that original bill for the Tennessee Firearms Association. And I think John Harris is here. I saw him earlier in the back of the room. A great organization that stands for Tennesseans' Second Amendment rights. But it's the Constitution. We go back to the Constitution, the thing that we take an oath to. Well, in D.C. this year, you know what happened with the vaccine mandate, right? It was horrible. And I pushed hard to get that vaccine mandate removed from the military. And actually, when the Democrats were still in control, convinced them to accept my amendment. They didn't vote on the amendment to get rid of the vaccine mandate for the military, but they did agree to not dishonorably discharge, which I thought was, well, gee, thanks. But it was the right thing. Make sure if we're going to kick them out, we're not going to kick them out with a dishonorable discharge. Not men and women who are willing to die for this country. And we co-sponsored the amendment that eventually removed the mandate for the military. But by the Constitution, the government can tell the military what to do. So constitutionally, they had that right. Even though I fought against it, they had that right. What the president didn't have a right to do by the Constitution was to say to businesses in this country, you must have a vaccine mandate. And he chose not to do it because he knew it'd be unconstitutional and wouldn't pass. But what he did do was say, if you're going to contract with the government, you have to have a vaccine mandate. And that hit our airline guys. And four airlines, the big four, some of them implemented the vaccine mandate, some of them chose not to and chose only to test their people. But United Airlines fired 2,200 pilots. 2,200 pilots. Now, we had an amendment on the FAA authorization bill to mandate from the federal government to those businesses to rehire those individuals. That seems appropriate, right? It's just not constitutional. Who here wants the federal government dictating anything to us?
Come on.
So I voted no on that amendment, and it of course, people are like, are you for vaccine mandate? No, I'm for the Constitution. And the Constitution, the federal government does not have a right to come and tell your business how to hire people. Now, they've got an amendment in the Constitution, right, that tells us a few constraints about that. But the businesses should not be told. It's all about the Constitution. It comes always down to the document and what the document says. And that's what I took an oath to defend. And it's very interesting that the oath I took at age 17 to go to war for our country, to defend our nation, to defend the Constitution, is the exact same oath I took as a United States Congressman. It's identical. And so, for me, I will defend that Constitution against all enemies, foreign and domestic, until the air is out of my lungs. And I know you all are in this room because you feel the same way. Now, I will tell you that I mentioned at the beginning about the threats being domestic. Probably the greatest threat to our country right now is the division in our country. Because united, we can get through anything. And part of the problem is our education system, and I love our teachers. I wrote the Teachers' Bill of Rights. But not in our state, but in other states, they're teaching kids a different kind of history about this country. And that's why the 917 project is so very vitally important, to get the Constitution, the document, into the hands of these young people. And maybe, just maybe, we can have a unifying vision again. China, the next 100 years will be defined by the challenge between the United States and China. And if we're united, we can win. But if we're divided, I don't know. Because in China, they're operating on a unified mission to return China to the top of the hill, as they call it, the Middle Kingdom, where all the states around them are tributaries. This is the emperor of China since the Shang Dynasty, all the way through to Xi Jinping. Their vision is to overcome 100 years of humiliation and return China to be the preeminent force power in the world. And they are on a breakneck pace to achieve it. The only way we stop it is to unite this country around a common vision. And that common vision is the document. Because the document is about, if we put it in one word, it's about freedom. It is about unencumbered people from government, unencumbered from government, who are running their own government. A government of the people, by the people, for the people. And if you want to see the contrast, all you have to do is go back to our founding, that American Revolution. And you can compare it to a revolution that happened just shortly afterwards. A revolution in France. Our revolution began in our churches. Their revolution did away with their churches. They turned them into houses of reason and decided that what's morally right can be decided through reason and by the individual, moral relativity. They had chaos in the streets, guillotining whomever. And that chaos ended in a totalitarian dictator, Napoleon Bonaparte. Our great founders began the revolution in the churches, fostering a virtuous people with a concept of a fixed moral right, a virtuous society, a government of the people, by the people, and for the people. That's what we're fighting for. And it's sealed in this document. The document that this organization is so valiantly defending and getting to the youth of America. And with it, just maybe, we can unify around that vision again of freedom, of equality, of opportunity for everyone. Thank you for being here. Joni, thank you for what you're doing. God bless the 917 Project. God bless America.